Chris and Chris Talk Movies.
Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Chris Ferry, and of course, this is my co-host.
My name is Chris Huddleston.
And today we are both very excited to be talking to you about the 1995 science fiction film, Strange Days.
Have you ever jacked in? Have you ever wired tripped?
You ready?
This is not like TV, only better. This is life. It's a piece of somebody's life. It's about the stuff that you can't have, right? The forbidden fruit, straight from the cerebral cortex. I mean, you're there, you're doing it, you're feeling it. Are you beginning to see the possibilities here? I am your main connection to the switchboard of the soul. I'm the magic man.
This has got something to do with the wire. Sooner or later, it washes up on your beach.
Fan mail from some flounder?
It's the dark end of the street. How do you like it now?
You records it all. Everything.
And gives it to you.
Why me?
There's more to this whole thing than you think.
Give us the tape right now!
You don't know how high up the food chain this thing goes.
Do you know what this tape could do if it got out? I see the world opening up and swallowing us all.
This is conspiracy paranoia.
The issue isn't whether you're paranoid, Lenny. The issue is whether you're paranoid enough.
No more games. Whatever's going on, you have to get out of here now.
Get him out.
This tape is a lightning bolt from God. It can change things that need changing before we all go off the end of the road.
It'll be an all-out war, and you know it.
Well, maybe it's time for a war.
Come on, man, cheer up. World's gonna end in 10 minutes anyway.
Do you have a synopsis for us, Mr. Huddleston?
I do. So Strange Days, as you said, 1995 film. It was not a screenplay, but a story idea by James Cameron. It was directed by Kathryn Bigelow, and it stars Ralph Fiennes, Angela Bassett, Juliette Lewis, Tom Sizemore, Michael Wincott, Vincent D'Onofrio. And the synopsis from Rotten Tomatoes is former policeman Lenny Nero, Ralph Fiennes, has moved into a more lucrative trade, the illegal sale of virtual reality-like recordings that allow users to experience the emotions and past experiences of others. While the bootlegs typically contain tawdry incidents, Nero is shocked when he receives one showing a murder. He enlists a friend, bodyguard Mace, Angela Bassett, to help find the killer, and the two soon stumble upon a vast conspiracy involving the police force Nero once worked for. So I don't remember if you had seen this or not.
Yes, I have a couple
okay.
times. I haven't seen it
Okay.
in a while, but I have seen it a couple times.
I had not seen it, but you go ahead and
No, you go. This is the way
Okay.
we do it.
So this was one that for whatever reason I was aware of this film, but I just never got around to seeing it. And then this started getting a bit of a buzz. So we tried to watch this a while back, and it was
Right.
hard to find.
Yeah.
And they recently added it to HBO Max. So if you have HBO Max, it is on there. Great print. It looks fantastic. And that's the first thing I'd say about the movie. It looks really great. The look of it I thought was excellent. All of the performances are good. It was interesting to me to see Ralph Fiennes in kind of a different role. He's a bit of a sad sack, in this, and we're used to seeing him as villains and very kind of intimidating, but he's more, a lot of this movie you feel kind of sorry for him. there are a lot of interesting themes, I think, and we can get into that more as we go along. My only real criticism that I would have of this, that the only thing that kind of bummed me out is so we spoil these movies, and this is a major spoiler right off the bat. So
yeah, this is a mystery. It's like it's a mystery.
kind of a neo-noir, right?
Yeah, hard-boiled, exactly. Neo-noir. So it's a detective story. Things get gritty and dirty and ugly, and there's sort of a sickening twist at the end. So we're gonna spoil that.
So that was the biggest complaint. That I liked almost everything about this movie, but my one real complaint is, so you have Tom Sizemore, who is he's the best friend of Ralph Fiennes, and so Ralph Fiennes deals in, there are these virtual reality kind of headset things that people wear, and it's called Squid, right? I think.
And they spell out what that stands for,
right? And Ralph Fiennes sells these. They call them tapes, but they're mini discs, is what they used, because mini discs seemed futuristic at the time, I guess. And so people, record themselves doing various things, and the ones that he sells, they tend to be porn, basically, or there are some. At the very beginning of the movie is a robbery, and a guy falls to his death at the end of that. I was a little unclear. Is the technology entirely illegal? Like, is it like you're not allowed to have the tech, or is it just these racy things that he's selling are illegal? I was kind of unsure about that.
I don't actually remember. I think it's illegal. I think it's black market.
Okay.
That it was developed by the government. They say in the film it was developed by the cops or the government as a replacement for the wire. So you could be wearing one of these it looks like a little rubber spider thing that with nodes. And what happens a lot is people wear it under a hat or under a bad wig. So they're recording. They've got one of these things. You put on this little, rubber cement looking sort of skull cap.
Right.
And that's how you watch other people's recordings, and that's how you record.
So Ralph Fiennes,
my understanding is that it is illegal, but it's sort of everywhere. It made me think of like weed or something. It's
right.
Like, you're not supposed to do it, but everybody seems to be doing it.
Yeah. And Ralph Fiennes is able to get, kind of the good stuff to sell to wealthy businessmen, and these kind of people. And he finds so Juliette Lewis is this ex-girlfriend of his that's gotten involved with this music producer guy who's evil, and Ralph Fiennes keeps trying to get her back, and this friend of hers gets murdered, and it's one of the recordings is of this guy murdering her. And then there's a couple other examples of that. And so, spoiler alert, it turns out to be Tom Sizemore. And pretty much from the first almost frame that you see Tom Sizemore, you're like, well, he's going to turn out to be bad. That was just so, so I was really disappointed when it turned out to be that he was the killer, because it was just so blatantly obvious, and I was just thinking, he
doesn't get a lot of good guy roles, Tom Sizemore.
That's true. Yeah. And he has this ridiculous long hair wig in it. To credit the movie, at the end, they show that it's a wig. Juliette Lewis rips it off of him. But that was the only thing that kind of, and I just thought it was funny that it's like, oh, this is your best friend, and you just didn't know that they were this psycho killer guy, But and then by the end of the film, so there's kind of several plot lines going on, but there's a rapper who is also this kind of revolutionary who is killed by the police. He's shot by Vincent D'Onofrio, and that has been recorded, and Ralph Fiennes has the recording of that, and the cops are trying to get it back from him.
That's actually why Iris gets killed.
Right, because she was the one who'd
Iris
been wearing
was wearing the wire that recorded the assassination of this. He's sort of he's a prevalent hip hop artist, but he's also kind of a civil rights icon too. He's
right.
a very outspoken, a la Malcolm X, about the inequities and how, you know, racist evolved and all of that. But he's also like a chart topping rapper.
Right. So by the time you get to the end of the movie, they are, Ralph Fiennes and Angela Bassett are, Angela Bassett confronts the dirty cops, and then she has them handcuffed and at gunpoint, and other cops come in and start beating her. And so I did not remember from the time that the film was released there being controversy about it. And I read a couple of articles and they said that it was, you know, somewhat controversial at the time, but it felt like, you know, and a lot of good science fiction does this, that this movie is almost more relevant today than what it was at the time that it was made. And, you know, this is one distinction would be that it was a clear reference to Rodney King, you know, her being beaten is and, you know, I read that, you know, James Cameron said it was about, you know, about that, about the LA riots and everything. But I just got to thinking, man, if this movie were released now, you know, we didn't have social media and all the outlets that we have now. I think this would be hugely controversial. A movie where, you know, the cops are beating a black woman and then the crowd starts beating the cops and stomping on them. And, you know, all of this.
I don't know.
Maybe, I don't know.
How controversial it'd be. I think one of my, and I like this movie. I'll show you my hand ahead of time. But one of the things I think that doesn't quite work about it, and why it wasn't a bigger movie.
Let me interrupt you for 1 second. It was a flop. The budget was $42 million. It only brought in about $8 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a pancake. I didn't realize it did that poorly.
Yeah, it did really badly.
It's not a great script. The you know, the sort of the plot ends up feeling kind of formulaic.
Mm-hmm.
The dialogue is a little canned, like it's a little hard-boiled. However, you've got some terrific, you know, I think Ralph Fiennes and Angela Bassett make it soar as much as it can. Like there was a handful of times when I was sort of distracted by, sometimes in a movie where I think the writing gets a little clinky, no matter how compelling the performance is, it kicks me back out of the movie and I'm imagining the words on the page that the actor just said. And that happened a few times for me in this film, but I thought the performances were compelling. They're both so young and they're both so good looking, you know, and it's certainly not the fault of the actors. And D'Onofrio, you know, it's clear that he was directed to sort of channel a lot of the D'Onofrio energy that he brought to Full Metal Jacket in this. And I think and this is the director, this isn't the actor. I think the director should have pulled him back a little bit because he's pretty over the top.
Mm-hmm.
Like he is evil incarnate. He's a snarling, you know, mad dog of a racist cop. What the movie teases is that this is some big conspiracy that goes all the way to the top, and it follows through on that red herring. What turns out is, nope, it's just this racist cop and his loyal racist partner. Like
Right.
His partner probably wouldn't have even shot the guy at the traffic stop. I mean, they definitely pulled him over because he was driving while black.
Mm-hmm.
But then when this guy started chewing him out, he's on his knees, you know, saying, "Oh, wait till you hear my next song." And he reads his name off of his, you know, badge. Stiglitz or Stigler or whatever. He's like, you just wait, Officer Stigler, till you hear my next #1 single, because it's going to be all about you. And the D'Onofrio character has enough snaps and just executes him, just shoots him in the head, and then shoots the other guy. And then it's those two and two women, and the women take off. One of them is Iris. That's we're seeing at her point of view. And the other one runs and they shoot her in the back, and Iris sort of gets away by the skin of her teeth. And that's kind of what sets the whole thing in motion. But where it ends is Angela Bassett wants to blow the whole thing open. And Ray Fiennes says, you know, you can trust this police commissioner. He is, you know, he's a straight arrow to a fault. Like, I hate him, and he fired me, and I think he's a real prick.
Yeah.
But he's, you know, there's no way this guy is not clean. He's honest. So she takes his word for it and gives it to him, and it looks at first like that's exactly the wrong thing, and he's going to bury it. But he shows up at the end and arrests the two cops, and it turns out it was just these two cops, which I actually think in 2023 is kind of the safe op, right? I mean, after the Catholic Church and after we know what has come out about the LAPD, and, you know, these things, it's terrible because I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but you do have, especially when it comes to race in America, time and time again, you have these, you know, like all of the shootings of black motorists. And I mean, the list of names is as long as your arm, and you go, well, it's not that I think they get together and put on white hoods and agree to behave this way, but there doesn't, only until extremely recently does there seem to be any repercussion. Oh, they're on paid leave for a couple of months and they come back. We just had the first officer convicted of one of these shootings within the past year, right? It was 2021 or 2022, the first time ever anyone had ever. So I actually feel like, while it's not, you know, the Illuminati, there does seem to be a kind of a business as usual where, with social media and everything, we are what they weren't aware of in 1995. They couldn't see it from high enough up, right? They couldn't piece together all of these different instances of Iris to sort of see how widespread the, you know, proverbial cancer of this institutional racism was. So I don't know that it would be all that controversial now, actually, just because the people start beating the police. I mean, the police would probably speak out against it, but
I think it probably there are just more outlets that would be talking about it. I think you would definitely have certain. So. I think you would definitely have certain, you know, shows and things like that would be complaining about this. I don't know necessarily that the public at large would be, you know, it would be any more controversial with them than it was at the time. But I guess it's just, they're just more, we have more of an outrage machine today than we did back then because of social media and all that, you know.
That's true. I would say that the first time I watched this, what felt sort of sci-fi dystopia was, and now this is set very much in LA, and it doesn't zoom out to give us a picture of what it's like in other cities or the rest of the country or the rest of the world. But certainly what felt dystopian was, you had said, you know, we had texted back and forth about, it felt a little bit like Predator 2. It just sort of open warfare in the streets and every man for himself, and, you know, people mugging each other and hitting each other with cars, and the cops sort of doing what they can, but there was just no stopping the chaos in the streets. And I think when I first saw this, which was closer to its release, that felt kind of radical to me, that there would be this big population of people that felt so close to the boiling point. But after January 6th, I'm like, I mean, the teams are sort of switched around, and the colors and the topics are sort of switched around. But I feel like our American society is so divided now that this concept of a society, you know, being afraid that it's going to boil over and people are going to say storm the Capitol or whatever, it doesn't feel like such a radical idea in 2023.
Yeah. For sure.
And what's interesting is that that's happened here in this film, and there is made in 1995, but it's only projecting 5 years into the future.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought there's a lot of this movie that feels, the idea that if they had said, well, it's 2025 or 2035, I think in 2023, the idea that you might get some technology that can read brain scans and record brain scans would seem a whole lot more plausible. That's the sci-fi leap of this film, is that they've got this technology that you can record. And it's like, when you play it back, it's like you're experiencing it.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't get under the hood into like how it all works, but that's the sci-fi magic wand of this film, is this magical technology.
Right.
That doesn't seem to have affected any other technology. There's not smart cars. When you get an answering machine message, there's sort of a transcription that pops up. It's like, hey, pal, and you see the words popping up on the screen as the guy talks. I'm like, that's it? You could read brainwaves?
And we also talked about via text. One thing, this movie didn't feel all that dated to me. I mean, I guess the only thing that really felt dated was you have like a good bit of grunge music in this.
Right.
And then also the cars, they're just cars that were around in 1995, and they don't really do anything to make, and it's like you said, it's only 5 years. So it's not like cars change, that much. But the other thing that they did not do was, and you said the styles kind of look like it's 1968 or something. Ralph Fiennes has this big wide tie, that he wears. And I thought that was smart because, we know that fashions are constantly repeating themselves. I mean, we're in an era right now where like a lot of 90s stuff, is coming back. And so I thought that was smart when so many sci-fi movies want to have, everybody wears see-through plastic clothing or something, and that would make, but it didn't feel all that, other than and this is, again, we've talked about this before, you feel a little old if you were around during this time watching these old films, because like you said, everybody's young and good looking, and I was amazed at how much Ralph Fiennes looked like Bradley Cooper. Like they could, the two of them could have been brothers. I mean, I was really knocked out by that. But I had some other point that I was going to make. Oh, one thing that I thought was interesting is, they're kind of building up to, you're coming on to New Year's Eve, and they're building up to, we're going into 2000, and like something terrible is going to happen. It kind of never really does, other than this thing with the cops beating Angela Bassett. But I was thinking, was the Y2K bug not a thing yet in 1995? Do you remember? Was it not until we got into like the last couple of years?
I don't remember. But I do think it was like 98.
Yeah.
And into 99, when people had latched onto that as sort of, despite what Microsoft was saying, it's like, we've patched it, it's fine, it's going to be fine. People were like, oh, of course they're going to say that. And, it was a sort of a technical thing that they could get a toehold on to make the aimless fear
and
seem plausible.
Like you said, I am not a conspiracy theorist, but I had kind of my own conspiracy theory about Y2K, that you had the media was, for a year or so leading up to it, planes are going to fall out of the sky, and if you're in an elevator, you're gonna fall to your death, and just all these horrible things are going to happen. And then when we got pretty close to it, that kind of went away, that they just sort of stopped talking about it. And I always wondered so that would have been the Clinton administration, I guess. I always wonder if kind of quietly behind the scenes, if the government didn't say to media organizations, you need to back off on this, or there's going to be like a widespread panic. You know, it just always seemed funny to me that it was like this, everybody's going to die and it's going to be horrible. And then it just, you know, like it was almost like a few weeks before Y2K, it just kind of went away and they just stopped talking about it. I don't know if it just something else bumped that out, but it was, I mean, they
certainly wouldn't bother the media of today.
No.
But
that just always seemed funny to me that
it's possible that they threatened it. It's possible that they threatened litigation. They said, you know, we're recording this fear mongering you're doing, and we know why you're doing it. It's to drive ratings. But if all hell breaks loose because of your fear mongering, you know, once we get things back under control, we are going to hold you accountable, you know, for ginning this up. And that might have gotten their attention, but I have
no evidence to back that up at all. But I always just thought it always just seemed very strange to me that it was just like it, you know, everybody was just almost like terrified, and then it just went away. I don't know if maybe there were other stories that, you know, they decided it didn't do well for ratings and other stories bumped it off or what, but it just always seemed very strange to me. But
I don't know.
But yeah, this you know, as I said, I'd always been aware of this, but I'm glad that I finally got around to seeing it, because I mean, I think it's certainly not hard sci-fi. I mean, you really, other than this AI technology, as we said, there isn't really any other sci-fi element to it, but it's just a mostly pretty well put together, more of a noir thriller kind of a thing that looks great. And also, we talked about this via text as well. Oh no, you go ahead.
No, I was gonna agree with you. I think this is 100% a noir thing, complete with the exploitation, right? There's a lot of skin. A lot of what he's dealing in is sex stuff. You know, I mean, there's a lawyer that comes in, and we get to see Ray Fiennes' character doing the sort of sales pitch, you know, the kind of first time free sales pitch to a new affluent customer who's never done it before, and walking him through it. And he's like, you know, you want to ski down, you know, you want to be skiing down the mountainside. You can get anything you want. But he said, I imagine a guy like you, if you want to go skiing, you just catch a flight to Vail and go skiing. But, you know, you see that girl over there, how'd you like to be the guy she's with there for 20 minutes, the right 20 minutes? So it's all very kind of pimp. It's all very pornographic stuff. You get the sense. And but he's a pusher with a heart of gold, because he asserts from the beginning, I don't do blackjack snuff, which is basically snuff films where it's, you know, because this is crazy, you know, blood in the streets. LA, there's, you know, all kinds of that material for those people who want to experience. What he does sell is like, guys, the opening scene, the hook is somebody's wearing one of these things, and they knock over like a liquor store or a convenience store. So you get the adrenaline and all this, and he's watching, and the guy is trying to jump across a roof, but he falls to his death. And when he hits the ground, there's sort of static, and then we cut to Ray Fiennes ripping it off, being like, man, why didn't you warn me? You know, I hate that, you know? So, but it unfolds with, you know, there's a girl, there's a woman that he was in love with, and she's left him for another man. And, you know, that guy is a real piece of work, and he's always rubbing salt in Ray Fiennes. So it's very to formula, except that it's set in a future where there's this technology.
And it's kind of like
he really could have been selling like illicit film reels or something. You know what I mean? He really could have been selling some salacious something, you know. He's a kind of a greasy guy, but he's got a heart of gold. That's why Angela Bassett likes him. He used to be a cop. I would have liked to have seen more about why he quit being a cop.
Exactly, yeah.
Because he does seem kind of broken. He seems like a good guy that got pushed too far and was sort of like, I can't do this anymore. And now he's just, I mean, he's charming and he's a good salesperson, but it's really the low his place is a dump and he's living hand to mouth. Right?
He's always
really
his
in the
car
gutter.
keeps getting repossessed.
Yeah, he's really living in the gutter. And I think it would have been interesting. Now, the other thing I'll say is I think this movie is too long.
Yes.
It's 2.5 hours long. And there's this, they could have cut out a whole plot thread from this and probably brought it in at 1:45, and it would have been a better movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like if they'd have just done the whodunit, or if they'd have really wanted to play up the kind of race war theme, I don't know. I think it bit off more than it not necessarily could chew, but more than it ended up sort of tying off. I know that's mixing a metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
By the end, I don't think it tied everything off elegantly, and that was a little disappointing. I realize as we're talking about this that I've been really picking it apart, and I think this is all true, and yet my experience of watching it, this is maybe the 4th time I've seen this movie since it came out. I think it's a really enjoyable watch, and I think it's just because the performances are so committed, you know? I mean, I think that these are actors that have really done their work. Sometimes the dialogue is a little corny. Sometimes it's over the top, and sometimes things haven't aged as well as other things. But, you know, especially the scenes where Ralph Fiennes and Angela Bassett are, you know, in the scene together, I just think it's absolutely absorbing. You know,
Right.
his American accent is good, but not great. You know, there's lots of little quirks and things to pick apart about this movie, but I do enjoy watching it.
Yeah. With the kind of nitpicky things, you definitely have some movie logic stuff in this that you know, we have a bit of the same thing as we had with Cherry 2000 that we watched recently, where there's a bit of a almost a romantic comedy, even though this is not a funny movie, but almost a romantic comedy kind of conceit where it's like he's in love with one girl, and the girl that he should be with, or the woman he should be with, is in love with him. And you know, you're watching the movie and you're like, forget about Juliette Lewis and just go with, you know, with
Angela Bassett.
Stop
taking her for granted.
Yeah, stop taking her for granted.
She's amazing.
And
right?
you also have the thing of, yeah, I mean, she looks incredible. She could beat up anybody.
And does. She saves his bacon a number of times in this movie.
Nobody would ever mess with you. If they did, she would beat them up. But you also have the thing of, you know, he's a good looking guy, but as you said, he's a mess. And, you know, you could maybe see why Juliette Lewis would make, you know, she has all these problems and things, and, you know, obviously isn't making great life choices, but Angela Bassett seems to have things together. It's just sort of like, why is she interested in him?
Right.
You know, there's one scene where when he was the cop, you know, flashback when he was a cop,
right?
Something happened at her house, and she had this little boy, and
well, her husband, the father of her young son, was into something illegal,
right,
in the house, dealing drugs, something. And the cops come and drag him out, and he's in prison. And, you know, she's a nurse. We see her kind of coming home from work to this scene at the house as her husband's being dragged out. And she's screaming at him like, in the house where your son is, you know? And she runs inside to find her son. And I was going to say Bradley Cooper, Ralph Fiennes, who then is a cop, is, you know, kneeling there with the son, kind of talking him down, being like, you know, he's saying something about, you know, loves you very much and everything's going to be okay. And he's comforting the kid. And so that's the sort of thing we see. But at the end, when we have this sort of what feels like an 80s action movie shot where D'Onofrio's got a gun and starts, you know, sort of goes into slow-mo, he starts shooting at them. He's trying to shoot Angela Bassett, and Ralph Fiennes is there and sort of grabs her and spins her around, so like shields her with his body. And it's an impulsive, you know, it's just like this protective act. And so we and she gets more talking about it than he does. He's kind of checked out and worried about his own shallow stuff for most of the movie, but we get the portrait of a woman who is looking for a man who shows up.
Mm-hmm.
And he is a mess, and she's right on the verge of giving up on him, literally, in the movie. But I think she senses that he's damaged, but deep down, he's a right guy.
Right.
And that's what she loves about him, is that he's a show up guy when push comes to shove. And we don't get to see an aftermath where he gets his life together or whatever. It's just not that movie, but
I did think that Hollywood ending was, it made me laugh a little bit, because you have the so you have D'Onofrio and the other David Fitchner is the other cop. So that's another guy who went on to be, a big actor. And the police chief or whatever he is comes in and says, arrest these men.
Just in the middle of this crowd,
in the middle of this mob scene, as if like
he's at like a fancy black tie party somewhere. And nope, now he is down here in the middle of the streets. Why? What are you doing here?
And you knew that was what was going to happen, that he was going to come in, to the rescue. But yeah, as if like even the other police would be like, you can't go down there, you're going to get killed. But he goes in and says, arrest these men. And sadly, and go ahead.
They set it up like he's going to walk in and say, unhandcuff these men, exonerate these men, because he's the head of the secret cabal, right? And what he says instead is, arrest these men.
Yeah. And then they are taking, they take Juliette Lewis away in a police car, because she's been involved in all this stuff, and she gets let off. And so then they, each of Angela Bassett and Ray Fiennes have been injured. And so they actually put Angela Bassett in the limousine of the police chief. And, they're going to take her, I don't know if they're going to take her home or they're going to take her to the hospital or what. And then Ray Fiennes runs over and, puts his hands on the glass, and she gets out and kisses him. And I thought, Angela Bassett would just be like, you were just talking a few hours ago about how much you love this woman. And it's like, is it just like, now that she's going away to prison or whatever, now you're going to have, you know what I mean?
Right.
I think a person in real life would just be kind of pissed. Just like, I don't know, man.
I think in real life, you'd be in shock from all the trauma that just happened.
That too.
It's a crazy rock ending, but
yeah. So it's a very Hollywood,
I'm still surprised that at 41 million, it only made 8. Like, I just think it's a more entertaining film than that. Now, maybe it was hot button issues. Like
maybe it just wasn't marketed well at the time, who knows? But considering this cast, and everything. And another point that you brought up, I was listening to another podcast, and they reviewed Wild Things. And I'm sure we probably had a similar discussion to this back when we did Basic Instinct, but they were talking about how, the erotic thriller was such a big thing in the 80s or in the 90s, really kind of late 80s, early 90s. And then it went away. And this has some elements of that erotic thriller thing, although you get into where, some of it is tittillating, but some of it is also disturbing, because there's a rape scene in this film, pretty harrowing. I mean,
but it is, because it's a murder.
Yeah,
we see it POV from the killer that is recording it. So Ray Fiennes experiences it in part. I mean, the event, the circumstance itself is upsetting on its own.
Right.
But what's interesting to me about the trope of this sort of, brain scan thing is that then seeing another character who has just experienced it, not just watched it like watching a tape, but experienced it, like when the thing is finally over, he kind of rips the thing off his head and lunges out of the car and is vomiting on the sidewalk, because it's so upsetting to him. And it's amplified by then you have another, not just a witness, but like almost a participant in it. And I think that's all performance, like in directing, that you have to be like, wow, you now need to springboard off what the film audience has just seen by showing, by anchoring that in the film, by how traumatic. We just watched it. He just lived it. Right. And I think that it's a funny thing. Like, I just think that the film is quite successful in doing that.
They do a good job presenting that. Yeah.
Yeah. And watching, sometimes having, like when he's selling it to the lawyer for the first time, he gives him a little taste. He's like, I want you, before we start talking about prices, I just want you to see what we're talking about. And he puts it on, and the guy sort of starts caressing himself and sighing, and it's funny. You're like, what the hell is happening here? And when he takes it off, he looks amazed, and he says, "You were just an 18-year-old girl taking a shower."
Yeah.
And the guy's face lights up. He's like, "You beginning to see the possibilities of this?" And it really sells the concept, right? So if you just say, "Oh, it's this funny rubber hat you wear, and it lets you be other people and experience, but it's safe."
Right.
You're not really doing it. You're just getting to all the benefits of it without any of the consequences. We get to see that sold through the actors' performances. And I think that smacks of Cameron to me.
Yeah.
That the only way this concept gets off the ground is if you really show us how impactful, we need to see these users experiencing this stuff. I think one of the reasons why I like this movie is it's very successful at that.
For sure, yeah.
But it does, I mean, it's very much like Body Double. It's very much a sort of sex thriller in spirit.
And that's one of the things that I think is interesting along the lines of that, talking about wild things in some of these other movies is, I don't know, but like people who are maybe in their 20s now and weren't around when in the 90s and, late 80s is, to me, it's a little bit surprising when you watch these movies and so you had, so many actors in this, Ray Fiennes would have been coming off of Schindler's List. I mean, Schindler's List would have been a couple of years before this. Angela Bassett was a big star. Juliette Lewis would have done Natural Born Killers a year before this, which was a big deal. And of those actors, she's the only one who's nude, but Juliette Lewis is naked in this a lot. And so, and that just, we don't really have that in, outside of kind of art house movies. All that has moved to TV, HBO and all the streaming things.
Exactly.
There's lots of nudity there.
Exactly. Game of Thrones, right? It's about dragons, but it's this sort of softcore Cinemax, softcore late night. A lot of long, very graphic sex scenes in that show.
Yeah. But with movies, with like major movie releases, it's almost like it's taboo. I don't know if it's just to appeal to the widest audience possible or what, but it's just interesting how much that has changed and it just all moved to TV. I don't know if it's because, people can just see that in the privacy of their own homes and people are, more touchy about it today in a group. I don't know, but
that makes a lot of sense, right? Because it's not that, people don't want to see this anymore. People definitely want to see it. It was super popular in the 80s, right? All the way up through, that was a super popular genre.
Right. And even just nudity in general. I mean, they threw nudity into comedies and stuff. There'd be a quick like shower scene or a woman's changing clothes or whatever.
But I thought they discovered that people got uncomfortable in a group. So you're all sitting in a big movie theater with strangers and something really hot's going on screen. That audiences are like, privately, I really enjoyed that scene, but it did make me a little uncomfortable. Like, I go to church with some of these people,
Yeah, maybe that's
but at home you can, go back, you could pause the screen now. I mean, I think people just like to experience it privately, probably.
But you remake this movie today and have an A-list actor in the Juliette Lewis role, and
they're not going to
probably not
going to do that much. Skin.
Yeah. So I just think that's kind of an interesting aside. I mean, that's definitely something that has changed a great deal with movies, kind of the movies that we grew up versus today. Now, part of that is we have so many Marvel movies and those kind of things. So there's a lot of, this movie is a pretty hard R. I mean, it's not, there's not really a lot of blood in it, but in terms of just the language and the
themes,
the nudity and the themes, it's pretty hard R.
It's very, hard-boiled language, and there is some violence, and there's definitely a lot of skin, but it's really like, it's those scenes, like the rape scenes and the murders.
That was the rape scene was disturbing. And I mean, even the scene where when Vincent D'Onofrio shoots the guy, I mean, that was pretty.
Yeah.
And
it's an execution. Yeah, absolutely.
And then when they're chasing after Lois, and all of that, Cameron said in another article that I read, Cameron said, in addition to this being about the LA riots and the Rodney King beating, that this was, and I wasn't really thinking about this as being as much of a deal then as what it was, because you think of reality TV kind of being the Kardashians and those kind of things, but he also talked about this as being about reality television and voyeurism and all this kind of stuff. I mean, I guess maybe we had the like Geraldo and those kind of things, the talk shows that were and I guess probably Cops was probably around at this time, right? 1995 Cops would have been around.
It was coming. It was definitely coming, and I think we might have had stuff like Survivor.
Right.
I think we had already waded into the very beginnings of it.
But all of that has just, increased exponentially since then. So it's another thing that's, even more valid about the movie today than when it was released.
Right. And I mean, this is a whole different conversation, but sometimes late at night when I'm done watching a movie, if I've smoked or something and I'm not quite ready to turn it off and go to bed, I'll pull up YouTube and I'll sort of start, spelunking down some different avenues in YouTube. And there, I think we have, just like in the early internet when it was mostly porn and like, listservs, it has now gotten to a place. There's still all that on the internet, but it has branched out. It's gotten to the point where you can find the answer or information or opinions on just about anything in seconds. It's really a game changer. And I feel like YouTube, which at first started off being a lot of people trying to, make it or become a star or whatever, there's now a ton of content, not just YouTube, but TikTok or whatever, of, user-generated content that takes all different, everybody's doing it because they're hoping someone will watch, but they're not all trying to be the same 3 or 4 things now. Sure, there are lots of people trying to be the 3 or 4 things they believe that everybody wants to watch, right? They're just chasing the numbers. But there's a lot of really weird, interesting, like people making their own music. Like I wrote this song and they play it for you and that's the video. And you're like, wow, that was really good. And I think I would have been able to see that. Like this person lives in Washington State and I just never would have been able to see or been aware of this person's music without this platform. And I'm not evangelizing for the platform. I'm just saying that we all rolled our eyes when Survivor came out and people were like, oh God, unscripted reality television or whatever it is. But from the very beginning, the ratings were insane. So people were clearly riveted by it, for better or for worse. And I feel like what I didn't like about that was how manipulated and formulaic and the illusion was that this was spontaneous, but it really was quite heavily scripted, whether or not the thing coming out of people's mouths was pre-written or not. They curated it very aggressively to suit that kind of, MSG appetite viewers had. Whereas places like YouTube now and these platforms are more like the Wild Wild West. I mean, certain things rise to the top of the algorithm, but if you are looking for something specific and you spend a little time looking for it, you could find almost anything.
Yeah.
And some of it is absolutely, not to any formula at all. You're kind of like, wow, cool. I mean,
well, and you have all the, you have all the positive things that you mentioned, and you also have things like, with TikTok, and YouTube to a degree, but especially with TikTok, where you have people sharing, it's like voluntary voyeurism, where it's like, oh, I've seen things. I'll get into some algorithm somehow where it's like, oh, my spouse just left me, and the person's talking about it and crying, or my dog just died, or whatever. God. And they're doing a, like essentially like a reaction video to that.
To real trauma. Wow.
And because they want to share that, for whatever reason. And, that's fine, more power to the people. But that is, that's kind of a voyeurism that the people are doing themselves rather than somebody else filming it,
Anyway, I mean, I didn't mean to get so off track. I want to wrap this up just in the interest of time, but, I think just to bring that thought back around to the movie, I think there is a lot of theme level stuff that you can point to in this film and use as a starting point for a conversation, whether it's race or, specifically with the police, specifically in LA, technology and voyeurism, all of these things. I think at the end of the movie, they tie it off like it was a classic noir thing with a Hollywood ending.
They definitely wrap it up in a little bow,
with a little bow. And I think that, some of these themes that get kind of gestured at and hinted towards, not even hinted towards, but introduced into the movie, don't get developed.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like, oh, and there's this, and don't forget about that major thing. And oh, also, well, this is crazy too, right? And all of this is going on. Well, meanwhile, someone gets killed, and it kind of wants it both ways. It kind of wants you to take it seriously as a movie about capital I important, capital T things. But what it really is at its heart is just a detective story. I like the genre, but it's sort of an exploitation genre.
Mm-hmm.
And it wants to titillate in all of those ways. And it kind of, it wants its cake and it wants to eat it too. And I think that it could have been a better movie if it didn't try to talk about important things or introduce them so hard. They could be the world in which it's set, but the movie does more than this, because the movie is 2.5 hours long, because it actually devotes talking time where people are like, oh, this or that's happening is crazy. Where's it going to end? And then they follow it for a little while, but it never really gets the treatment. It really never gets mined in a meaningful way. Does that make sense to you? I mean, did you feel that when you watched this? Like it was like trying to get cachet by bringing in these big things, and then it didn't ever really unpack them in any way?
They're definitely kind of trying to do a little bit too much, because the Tom Sizemore turning out to be the killer, and then and another spoiler alert, he falls off of the top of this building, and that kind of feels like the finale. And then we have this extra bit with the police and Angela Bassett and all that, and it does seem a bit like kind of too many things going on at once. But
inexplicably, The Sixth Sense leaps to my mind, right? The Sixth Sense has a twist ending. I don't want to spoil The Sixth Sense for anybody listening who hasn't seen The Sixth Sense. There's a twist ending, and it's about the kid and the guy, right? And the guy is a therapist, and the kid is having a traumatic experience, and the therapist is helping the kid get through it, right? And we learn things along the way, and then there's a crazy twist at the end. But The Sixth Sense doesn't start, getting into, the state of adolescent psychotherapy in America today and the problems inherent in that. And it doesn't, you know what I mean? It doesn't go into these big global, it doesn't introduce these big aperture opening social things. or Blade Runner is another one that really does that opens the aperture to explore this kind of future society. Although characters don't get sucked into these little, side conversations about the world today, right? We just see it. The film just shows it to us. And this one does the former. This one introduces these big themes, and then the characters talk about it like that's what this movie is going to be about. And it is, at least in part. And then you think, well, I think it would have been a better movie if they'd have just shown and not told.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that.
But I do recommend it, and I did enjoy it. And if you have HBO Max and you like these actors, I think the performances are fun, and it sort of flabbergasted me that it didn't at least make its money back. $41 million. I mean, we've watched way worse movies than this that have made a profit. I mean,
oh, sure. Yeah. Much worse.
Yeah. This is a watchable movie, despite, I feel like I've been complaining about it the whole time, but I actually really do like this film.
Yeah, I would agree. It was really entertaining. I'm glad that I finally saw it. It seems that this could just be, I saw a lot on Twitter about this. So it could be, Twitter isn't necessarily real life, but it seems a bit like it's something that people are, I don't know if rediscovering is the right word, but that, a lot of younger people who wouldn't have seen this the first time around are now seeing it, that it's on, since it's on HBO Max. And yeah, so if you have HBO Max, it's definitely worth a watch. If you don't have HBO Max and you can find it elsewhere, that's good too. But I would have to say it's, just going off the top of my head, not necessarily thinking everything from this time, but I'd say this was definitely one of the better sci-fi movies of the 90s,
Yeah.
So it's worth, and Kathryn Bigelow, the director, went on to, she won the Oscar for The Hurt Locker, so she went on to be a big time director. So it's interesting to see one of her earlier films, and all of these, somebody, I don't know if The Menu is the first Ralph Fiennes movie that you've seen. You could go back and see when he had hair and all that.
He's done great work. And
yeah.
If you do watch The Menu, I'd like to talk about it since I've already seen it.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to watch it, and we'll do it.
It's an unusual role, I think, for Ralph Fiennes. It's sort of a surprise to see, and they're kind of marketing the movie on him like he's in the poster.
Yeah,
as I think he should be. But for now, chrisandchristalkmovies@gmail.com. That is our handle. And maybe you're watching us on YouTube. Maybe you're listening to us on one of your favorite podcast apps. Either way, thank you for joining us. If you have the ability to like and subscribe and comment and interact with us, that helps more people be aware of what we're doing here, which
exactly
we love to do.
Just talk to people too.
Yeah. For next time, I think we're doing the 1981 horror film Possession.
Very different movie from this.
Very different movie, which was sort of afraid was going to be kind of a lost film for a while, but it's now on Shudder, and they've restored it in glorious 4K. And we're going to talk about that next. So if you are into that genre, why don't you check it out and join us for that conversation? And
please do.
If you have anything else to add,
I think that's it for me.
Then we will talk to you all next week.